Hi everyone, my name is Habib Diallo. So this is my final exam presentation. In this project, I've applied the data of employee of company consisting of their education level, age, gender, payment years of experience, and whether they stayed with the company or not. So this project aimed to use statistical method taught during the course to analyze the data and provide answer to the meaningful questions. So I first imported the necessary Python library, including pandas for data manipulation, NumPy for numerical calculation, Matplotlib and Seaborn for visualization, and SCPy and Stat model for statistical analysis. So then I imported the library loaded of the employee data directly from an online source into Google Colab with pandas. This will enable a notebook to execute without the need for manual uploading of the data every time. So data cleaning, the first step was cleaning data set. I inspected the structure of the data using the shape info and describe function to understand the variable of the data types and then checked for missing values. Found that there were no missing values in the data set. Next I checked for duplicate record found in the 1889 duplicate rows. Since the duplicate record can by statistical analysis, I removed and reducing the data set to 2,764 unique observation. To improve the readability, I use the map function to convert live or not variable from numeric values into descriptive category called stated left. I also u- I also used a function to create new variable called age group, which group employee into young, mid-career, and senior category. This step ensured the data was clean and ready for analysis. Okay, well, is the age group. Data visualization. I explored the data using visualization. The first graph was a histogram showing description, employee age. From this graph, I observed the most employees were between approximately 25 and 30 years old, indicating that the company has a relative young force. The second visualization compared to employment statistics by gender. This graph showed that more male employees were included in the data set, while more male stayed than left. Female employees appeared to be relatively high turnover rates. The third visualization examined payment tiers across different cities. I found that payment tier 3 was the most common salary level in all cities, with Bangalore having the largest number of employees in this tier. Overall, this visualization helped me identify important patterns before conducting formal statistical analysis. Visualization 3. Here it is. Sample probability and then calculate the probability directly from the observed sample. The probability of selecting male employee was approximately 55.32%. So the probability of selecting an employee who was both male and had left the company was about 17.15%. The probability of a payment either working in Bangalore or belonged into payment tier 3 was approximately 77.28%. For example, given that an employee was a female, the probability that she left the company was about 49.72%. Finally, among employee into payment 3, the probability of remaining with the company was approximately 64.49%. So this probability described pattern within the sample rather than the entire employee population. You can run all of this screen. Normal distribution. So next I assess whether the age variable follow a normal distribution. I create a histogram and perform the Shapiro weak normality test. The test the test produce a p-value smaller than 0.005, indicating that the data were not perfectly normal distributed. However, because the dataset contained over 2,700 observations, the normal distribution still provided a reasonable approximation for probability calculation. Using the normal distribution model, I estimated several probability. For example, there was approximately 21.41 probability that a randomly selected employee was older than 25 years old. So, so the probability of an employee being between 25 and 32 years old was approximately 49.92%. Finally, the probability that an employee was younger than 27 was approximately 21.95%. Here is so confidence interval, and then construct a confidence interval. The first confidence interval estimated the average employee age. I am 95% confident that the true average age lies between 30.76 and 31.04 years. The second confidence interval estimated employees average experience in the current domain. The 95% confidence interval range between 2.58 to 2.7 years. Finally, I estimated the proportion of the employee who left the company. The confidence interval indicated that the true employee turnover rate is between 37.45% and 41.18%. Here is everything we need to see. Everything. And this is the hypothesis testing. So I performed three hypothesis tests. The first one was one sample t-test to determine whether the average employee age different from 30 years old. The p-value was less than 0.05, so I rejected the null hypothesis and concluded the average employee age is significantly different from 30 years old. The second test compared the average age of employee who stayed with those who left. Again, The p-value was less than 0.05, indicating a significant difference in the average age between the two groups. The final hypothesis examine um, the final hypothesis test examined that whether the employee turnover proportion different from 40%. This means there was sufficient evidence to conclude that the turnover rate differs significantly from 40%. So the chi-square test. Finally, I performed two chi-square tests. The first investigated whether the gender of an employee were associated. Since the p-value was less than 0.05, I concluded that gender employee gender employee status are significantly associated. The test examined the relationship between series and payment tier. Again, the p-value was below 0.05%, indicating a significant association between these two variables. Is everything you need to see? You can run it. So yeah, this is overall this project. It was shown how the application statistical method can be used to analyze employee data and provide answers. Analysis highlight the following: the workforce was relatively young. There were no important link between employee characteristic and the reason for leaving, and the use of probability confidence interval hypothesis testing and Q-score analysis were determined. So the project was used in a good example of the analysis in employee demographic, and rotation was used to review the statistical concepts that had been covered within the course. Thank you so much for